Hey guys, tonight we wander into the smoky world of ancient myths, where gods wear questionable sandals and titans play cosmic pranks over dinner. You're standing at the edge of a cliff in the distant golden world before time had clocks. Below, the world is still smoldering from its chaotic birth. Rivers not yet sure where they're supposed to flow, stars blinking like confused fireflies overhead, and mortals just trying to survive without central heating. That's where you come in. Or rather, where Prometheus does. This is the story of how one titan, whose name literally means forethought, decided that humans deserved more than raw squirrel meat and cold caves. So, he stole fire. Literal, burning, roast your sheep on it fire. And he paid the price. A hefty price. But not before pulling off one of mythology's most quietly hilarious acts of rebellion, tricking the king of the gods using, well, barbecue logic. The kind that makes your uncle leave the best cuts of meat behind because they're hidden under charred bones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere strange and sleepy, maybe a fjord, a rice paddy, or a laundromat in the middle of the night, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little mythology ship sails. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing beside Prometheus now, as he stares out over a world still crackling with divine mischief. He's not one of the Olympians. He's older, quieter, built like someone who chops mountain peaks for fun, but with a faraway look in his eyes, like he's always thinking 10 steps ahead and 10 steps sideways. Humans, still mostly confused about how elbows work, are doughy, in there, barefoot and shivering, trying to figure out how to cook grain without setting their beards on fire. And Prometheus watches them and sighs, because he made them. That's right. According to some versions, humans weren't created by gods like Zeus or Hera, but by Prometheus himself, sculpted from mud and tears and probably a little hubris, then brought to life with a whisper and a spark. And they're doing their best, but it's not great. One guy just tried to warm himself by hugging a rock. Another's trying to roast a yam by yelling at it. The scene is earnest, but tragic. Prometheus shakes his head. Up on Mount Olympus, the gods are not cold. They lounge in endless banquets, sipping immortal wine and arguing about whether swans make good disguises. They don't share fire. Fire is divine. Fire is power. And mortals? Mortals are the entertainment. So when Prometheus strolls into a god party with a plan to help the little guys, you already know it's not going to go well. Zeus, king of gods and thunderous side eyes, gives him the kind of look reserved for interns who suggest scheduling a meeting during ambrosia hour. Fire? For humans? He says, his voice like a thundercloud trying to pass as polite. And next, you'll want to teach them writing or math or, gods forbid, democracy. Prometheus, ever the calm rebel, just shrugs. They're cold. Zeus sips his drink. Cold is character building. You get the feeling this conversation has happened before. In fact, Prometheus has been pushing back against divine nonsense for a long time. He once sided with the Olympians during the Titanomachy, the war between the older titans and the flashy new gods like Zeus. A bold move, considering he is a titan himself. But lately, he's starting to wonder if he backed the wrong cosmic horse. Down below, a baby cries, and the smoke from a not-quite-extinguished lightning bolt curls into the sky. Prometheus makes his decision. The thing is, giving fire to humanity isn't just about comfort. It's about agency, cooking, forging tools, shaping the world. It's how humans move from surviving to living. And that, to Zeus, is a problem. Because gods only stay gods if humans stay in awe. So Prometheus begins to scheme, not rashly, like Ares would, not slyly, like Hermes might, but methodically, carefully. He's not just going to steal fire. First, he's going to embarrass Zeus. Because what's rebellion without a little theater? One day the gods and humans gather for a grand feast at Makoni, a shared ritual to decide how future sacrifices will work. And Prometheus? Prometheus is in charge of arranging the offerings. Now, here comes the barbecue logic. Prometheus slaughters a great ox, don't picture it too clearly, and divides it into two piles. One he stuffs with rich, glistening cuts of meat, but covers it with an unappealing layer of stomach and innards. The other pile? Just bones, dry and gleaming, but he wraps it all in glistening fat. You look down at the setup and realize it's a trap for someone who values appearances. Zeus, beaming like a game show host, points to the shiny, fat-covered pile. "I'll take that one." Prometheus smiles, probably with one eyebrow slightly raised. Zeus unwraps his prize and finds a lovely, fragrant pile of bones. No meat, no glory, just a shiny disappointment. Humanity gets the good stuff, the real meat, the sustenance. And Zeus? Zeus gets trolled. Now here's where things get a little academic. Historians still argue whether this scene is meant as a critique of religious ritual, a defense of why Greeks offered bones and fat to the gods, or just a cosmic roast, pun very much intended. Either way, Zeus does not laugh. He storms out of the banquet, muttering something about disrespect and long-term vengeance plans. And by the time you and Prometheus step out, into the fading twilight, you know it's not over. Because Zeus isn't just mad about the meat. He's about to take away something far more important: fire. You wake up the next morning, still in this mythic world of half-finished mountains and yawning dawns, and something's off. There's no smoke curling from human hearths, no soft hiss of roasting roots or sizzling meat over embers, just cold. Cold air, cold stone, cold fingers trying to spark warmth with twigs, and sheer optimism. Because Zeus, in the pettiest divine revenge imaginable, has revoked humanity's access to fire. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. With one thunderous command and a few well-placed bolts, he's removed every trace of flame from Earth. Even the coals from last night's hearths are now cold and gray, like burnt-out dreams. You follow Prometheus as he watches this unfold. He stands apart from humanity, not because he wants to, but because he has to. He's caught between two worlds, divine enough to sit in Olympus meetings about cloud budgeting, but human-hearted enough to weep when a child tries to warm their hands over a patch of sunlit moss. You notice something. He doesn't look surprised. Saddened, yes, but not surprised. Because Prometheus knew Zeus wouldn't take the bait lightly. He just didn't expect the fallout to hit this hard. And now, humans are suffering. It's more than just the inconvenience of raw food. It's the silence in the villages at night, the ache of cold spreading through bones and hope alike. The gods, up on Olympus, sip their warm nectar and glance downward occasionally, like landlords checking on tenants they've decided not to renew. Prometheus clenches his fists, the flames of frustration flickering behind his eyes, metaphorically for now. Now here's a fun historical tidbit. Early Greek society did, in fact, treat fire as a divine gift, often linking it with the hearth goddess Hestia, whose flame burned constantly in city centers. The idea of fire being sacred, and thus withheld or gifted by higher powers, wasn't just a myth. It was woven into law, religion, and even diplomacy. Losing that fire meant losing civilization itself. And so, Prometheus begins to plan. He can't ask for permission. That ship sailed somewhere between Zeus's snarky bone pile and his lightning bolt temper tantrum. No, this calls for theft. Very quiet, very clever, very flammable theft. But stealing divine fire isn't like swiping a matchbook. You can't just sneak into Olympus wearing a hoodie and sunglasses and come back with a Zippo. Divine fire lives in the heavens, pure, sacred, dangerous. If you bring it to Earth wrong, it'll burn through your hands, your village, your very reality. So Prometheus does what any thoughtful fire thief does. He finds a fennel stalk. Yes, fennel. as in the aromatic plant that tastes vaguely like licorice and shows up in about half of your grandma's old recipes. Turns out, the dry, fibrous interior of a giant fennel stalk is excellent for hiding embers. Nature's first thermos, basically. You watch him cut the stalk carefully, scooping out the soft center. He works quickly, methodically. He's done this before. Not the theft, necessarily, but the crafting, the building, the gentle art of giving humans what they weren't supposed to have. And then, just before dusk, he begins to climb. Mount Olympus stretches impossibly high above you, its peaks dusted with snow and Olympian arrogance. The winds are sharp, like whispered warnings. The path is winding, narrow, and, judging by the number of discarded amphorae, apparently not well trafficked. Prometheus moves silently. He doesn't have wings or invisibility or a cheat code, just experience, grit, and a healthy disrespect for authority. And here's where you get a real sense of how out of place he is among the gods. Unlike Hermes, he doesn't sneak. Unlike Apollo, he doesn't shine. He just climbs, steady as sunrise, fennel stalk tucked under one arm, defiance tucked under the other. By the time he reaches the edge of Olympus, the air is thin and shimmering with god stuff, whatever that is. The fire glows ahead, a strange, otherworldly flame that doesn't crackle like wood or smoke like coal. It pulses with something more ancient than time, more vital than language. And Prometheus? He just walks up to it. No one sees him. Not yet. Maybe because they're too busy arguing about whether peacocks should be sacred, or whether ambrosia pairs better with olives or figs. He reaches out, cuts a sliver of flame from the divine hearth, and tucks it into the hollowed fennel. No explosion, no alarms. Just a soft glow, nestled like a secret in the stalk. You would think, at this point, he'd run, or fly, or teleport. But no. Prometheus simply turns around and begins to walk back down the mountain. The thing about Prometheus is, he doesn't rush. He's not a thief stealing for thrill. He's a titan carrying a gift. Every step he takes is deliberate, solemn, like he's walking the first candlelight vigil in history. Now, fringe scholars have suggested that the Prometheus myth might encode ancient rituals of fire transfer, like how new colonies in Greece took embers from the mother city's hearth. It wasn't just symbolic, it was sacred continuity. When Prometheus carries that flame, he's carrying identity, memory, possibility. Halfway down the mountain, the wind shifts. Someone has noticed. The gods don't respond quickly, bureaucracy probably, but you hear thunder rumbling in the distance like a sleeping supervisor stirring from there. Nat Prometheus doesn't flinch. He reaches the edge of the human world just as dawn breaks. A small village stirs. Children huddle in animal furs. A woman tries to cook roots by mashing them very hard against a rock. And then he kneels. He opens the fennel stalk. The ember inside flares gently, like it knows its home. He presses it to dry grass, and just like that, fire returns. The smoke rises, the villagers blink, then cheer, then gather. And Prometheus, soot-streaked and probably quite sore, steps back with a quiet smile. Far above, thunder rolls. Because Zeus is definitely awake now. You don't need to look up to know Zeus is angry. The sky darkens just slightly, in that moody, performative way only thunderclouds controlled by immortal egos can manage. There's that low rumble again, like an old lion waking from its nap, discovering someone's been chewing on its favorite thunderbolt. Prometheus, for his part, just stretches out his arms like someone who knows what's coming, and is entirely unimpressed. Because here's the thing, he didn't just break a rule, he broke the rule. The unspoken, golden, very glittery rule that only gods should get to play with power. Giving fire to humans? That's like handing a toddler a box of matches and saying, "Good luck inventing civilization." But let's be honest, it worked. Within a few weeks, things on Earth are looking a lot warmer, literally and metaphorically. You stroll through the village where Prometheus lit that first ember, and already it's transforming. Clay ovens hum with quiet heat, smoke curls from rooftops in soft spirals, and someone's accidentally invented flatbread. It's peaceful. It's not going to last. Back up on Mount Olympus, Zeus is having what can only be described as a full-scale divine tantrum. He paces back and forth on his ridiculous golden throne, flinging thunderbolts like someone tossing pens during a meeting they didn't want to attend. "Who," he bellows, "told the monkeys they could bake?" The other gods shuffle awkwardly. Hera raises an eyebrow but wisely keeps her mouth shut. Hermes tries to make a joke about grilled figs and nearly gets incinerated. Dionysus just pours himself more wine. Honestly, who can blame him? Zeus isn't mad just because Prometheus disobeyed. He's mad because he was fooled. Twice. First, the barbecue stunt with the bones and the shiny fat. And now this. Fire, smuggled in a fennel stalk like a flaming burrito of rebellion. And here's where the myths get interesting. Some say Zeus had planned a response from the very beginning, that he'd allowed Prometheus to succeed just so he could set up his next move. Others say he was genuinely caught off guard and scrambled to save face by inventing a punishment so over the top it could double as a Greek tragedy subplot. Historians still argue whether Prometheus was punished for stealing fire or for making the gods look stupid. Either way, Zeus has made up his mind. The message must be clear. You don't disobey the king of Olympus and walk away with a thank you note and a gift basket. Prometheus must be punished, publicly, creatively. So what does Zeus do? Well, first, he has Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing and emotionally repressed elbow grease, forge an unbreakable chain. Not just strong, but divine, the kind that laughs in the face of bolt cutters and metaphysical locksmiths. Then he summons a great eagle. Not your average bird of prey either. This one is massive, titanic, wings like sails, talons like daggers, breath that probably smells like lightning and regret. Depending on which version of the myth you like best, the eagle is either a loyal servant of Zeus or some terrifying primordial force older than grammar. Then comes the main act. Prometheus is dragged, calmly, silently, to the edge of these Caucasus Mountains. You follow, your footsteps crunching softly through ice and old thundercloud ash. And then, they chain him there, to the rock, high up, above the tree line, wind howling, sky brooding, alone. Every day, the eagle comes, and every day, the eagle eats his liver, which, thanks to divine biology and mythological cruelty, grows back overnight. You lie there in the snow, watching. The eagle's wings beat like a thunderstorm in slow motion. Prometheus doesn't scream. He doesn't flinch. He just closes his eyes, endures, waits. And here's your fringe mythology tidbit for the night. In some versions, the liver wasn't just chosen at random. The ancient Greeks believed the liver was the seat of human emotion and personality, not the heart. So when the eagle devours Prometheus's liver, it's not just a physical torment. It's a symbolic one. It's eating his hope, his essence, every single day. You shiver. But Prometheus? He stares out over the world he helped build, the people huddled around new fires, cooking, surviving, dreaming. And he smiles, because the punishment might be eternal, but the fire? The fire was forever. Now let's pause here and admit something. For a bedtime myth, this is a lot. You've got divine pettiness, barbecue deception, liver regeneration. It's a lot to tuck in with. But there's something undeniably sleepy about the rhythm of it. Day after day, bird after bird, wind after wind, Prometheus unmoved. The punishment becomes routine, predictable. Even the eagle, after a while, seems bored. It lands with a tired flap, pecks out its grisly lunch, and flutters off to sulk in a cloud. And Prometheus? He just heals. Again and again. Some say he meditates. Others say he hums old Titan lullabies. You wouldn't be surprised if he starts naming the clouds. There's something strangely peaceful about it all. And it raises a quiet question in your mind, one that scholars still whisper about over lukewarm espresso in dusty university basements. Was Prometheus's endurance a kind of victory? After all, Zeus got his revenge. But not silence, not regret. Prometheus never apologized, never begged, never admitted wrongdoing. He just endured. He outlasted Zeus's tantrum, outlived the worst of the wrath. And somewhere, centuries later, a hero will climb these cliffs, arrow in hand, and change everything. But that's a story for another night. For now, you sit beside Prometheus, watching the stars blink overhead. The fire burns in homes below. The eagle circles, lazy and late. And the Titan smiles, liver intact for a few more minutes. You stretch your legs across the frost-bitten ridge and squint up at the sky. The eagle's not here yet. Maybe it's late. Maybe even divine birds hit snooze once in a while. Beside you, Prometheus shifts slightly on his rock, more like a polite shoulder roll than a struggle against the chains binding him to the cliff. It's not that he can't move, it's that he won't give Zeus the satisfaction. The punishment, though dramatic, is weirdly bureaucratic in its routine. Every morning, sunrise, eagle, liver, blood. Every night, healing, shivering wind, maybe a nap if the pain dulls long enough. Like a divine punch clock that never quite lets you leave. But tonight, you're going back. Back to the moment that lit the fuse. Back to that sacrificial feast. You can almost smell it again. Smoke, roasting ox, a hint of fennel still smoldering somewhere in the background. Because before the eagle, before the liver buffet, before the frostbitten cliffs and moody cloud decor, there was one meal. And it changed everything. You're at Mythology again, standing behind Prometheus as he gently slides two offerings into place. Remember, one pile of fat-wrapped bones, glistening like a trick, and one pile of juicy meat hidden under organs that look suspiciously like "no thanks" in physical form. It's not exactly subtle, but it doesn't need to be. Because Zeus? He is not the kind of guy who opens presents carefully. He picks the shiny fat pile because, well, of course he does. It glistens. It smells deceivingly rich. And because gods don't second-guess their taste, especially not in front of an audience. Now here's the part they don't teach you in middle school mythology class. This little act of divine misdirection wasn't just a prank. It set the rules for how all future sacrifices would work in Greek religion. Humans would always offer the gods the bones and fat, the beautifully wrapped, nutritionally hollow portion, while keeping the good stuff for themselves. Practical? Maybe. Passive-aggressive? Absolutely. Some scholars even argue that this myth reflects an early philosophical tension between appearance and reality. Others think it's just the Greeks trying to explain why the gods got the short end of the barbecue. Either way, you can imagine Zeus narrowing his eyes as he unwraps that shiny, fragrant pile and finds only bones inside. And the entire world watches him get publicly outwitted by a Titan. That's the moment it all changed. Because Zeus isn't just angry that he got duped, he's angry that the rules changed without him approving it. That the balance of power tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly, in humanity's favor. This wasn't just a barbecue, it was a rebellion. And Zeus? Zeus doesn't forget. But here's a detail most people miss. Prometheus never denies it. He never says, "Oh, it was an accident." He never pretends he mislabeled the piles. He stands there, arms crossed, looking for all the world like someone who just submitted the first sarcastic customer service review in history. Which brings us back to the cliff. You glance at Prometheus again. He's watching the stars now, humming something low and strange. Maybe it's a Titan lullaby. Maybe it's just boredom. You ask him, quietly, why he did it, and he answers without turning. Because they needed it, he says. Simple, not grand, not poetic, just needed. And in that moment, you realize something. Prometheus didn't steal fire because it was dramatic. He did it because it was necessary. Because freezing humans needed warmth. Because knowledge, once known, can't be hoarded like nectar in Olympus wine jars. And here's a fun fact to lull you deeper. Prometheus's name, Forethought, was meant to contrast with his brother, Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought. That's right. One thinks ahead, the other forgets to read the fine print. Guess which one Zeus uses in his next plan. But we're not quite there yet. First, let's take a moment and appreciate the slow unraveling of divine authority, because after the meat trick, Zeus loses something even bigger than a meal. He loses control. From that point forward, mortals know that gods can be outwitted, not defeated, let's not get carried away, but tricked. And that's a power of its own. The trick wasn't perfect. It led to a lot of liver-related fallout, as you've seen, but it opened the door for defiance, for thought, for questions, and for bedtime stories like this one. You settle deeper into your snowy seat. Prometheus shifts again, adjusting the weight of his chains like someone adjusting their sweater. The stars blink on, one by one. Somewhere down below, a child throws another twig on a fire and stares into its dancing orange light like it's the first magic ever invented. Zeus still simmers, but the damage is done. The fire's out there now, in every hearth, in every kiln, in every torch carried across land and sea, and it all started with a barbecue. You'd laugh, if not for the eagle now circling in the distance again. Right on time. The eagle circles wide above you now, casting a slow-moving shadow that glides over the cliffside like the hand of an impatient clock. Prometheus doesn't bother to look up. He knows the sound by heart, the beat of wings like thunder's little brat, her, the scraping screech of talons finding their perch. You brace yourself, but Prometheus just sighs. It's become so ordinary, but down on Earth, things are anything but ordinary now. Let's leave the cold rocks for a while. Stretch your legs, dust the frost off your dream self, and walk back down into the warmth. The world below is catching fire, but in the good way. You stroll through winding paths between early settlements, where firelight flickers from every threshold. Someone's roasting barley cakes on a flat stone. Someone else is boiling herbs and pretending it cures toothaches. Sparks drift into the air like lazy fireflies, and for the first time in ages, humans look content. Because with fire comes more than just heat. It brings time, leisure, stories. People start sitting in circles again, telling tales of Prometheus, of Zeus, of liver-regenerating stubbornness. And the myth grows, sprawling into 100 versions, each slightly different, each passed along by lamplight and yawn. In one version, Prometheus is the champion of humanity, the noble rebel who dared to cross a jealous god. In another, he's reckless, a titan who meddled too much, who upset the cosmic order and got exactly what was coming. And in a few very fringe tellings, he's something else entirely. A trickster, a thinker, maybe even a proto-scientist with a grudge against inefficiency. Historians still argue whether the Prometheus myth reflects an early moral tale or a coded philosophical critique of divine authority. Was he meant to inspire, to warn, or to lull ancient listeners into thoughtful sleep, the way we're doing now? No one knows. But the smoke from all those little fires curls upward toward Olympus, carrying with it a quiet defiance. Zeus sees it, smells it, hears the laughter rising from earthbound feasts. And he is not amused, so he doubles down. If you thought the eagle was dramatic, wait until you hear what comes next. Zeus decides that Prometheus isn't enough. Sure, chaining a titan to a cliff and letting an eagle redecorate his torso daily is satisfying. But the humans? They're still happy. and that's unacceptable. So Zeus begins crafting his next move. Enter Pandora. Now let's be clear, this isn't just a mythological version of create a distraction. This is an entire revenge plot disguised as a wedding gift. Because Zeus doesn't just want to punish Prometheus, he wants to undo what Prometheus gave. And how do you do that? Simple. You make a beautiful, curious, unsuspecting package, and you wrap inside it every possible inconvenience. The gods all pitch in. Hera gives charm, Athena gives craftsmanship, Aphrodite gives beauty. Hermes? Hermes gives a bit of sass and mischief, because no cosmic plan is complete without those. And then quietly, Zeus gives her a jar, not a box. That's a mistranslation from Renaissance times. It's a jar, wide-mouthed, heavy-lidded, sealed tight. And inside, all the world's troubles, illness, sorrow, anxiety, paper cuts, Wi-Fi outages, you name it. Zeus sends Pandora down to Earth as a gift to Prometheus's brother, Epimetheus. Now pause a moment here and remember what his name means, afterthought. If Prometheus is the careful planner, Epimetheus is the guy who reads the safety manual after setting the curtains on fire. Prometheus, chained up as he is, had warned him, don't accept any gifts from Zeus. But Epimetheus? He takes one look at Pandora and thinks, well, she seems nice. And that, as they say, is how the trouble begins. Now, back on the mountaintop, Prometheus probably hears rumors, whispers from wind spirits, gossip from Hermes, who probably couldn't keep a secret if it were stapled shut. And you can imagine the face Prometheus makes when he hears about the jar, a long, slow blink. Because he knows what's coming next. And you, sitting beside him again now, know too. It's not just a story, about fire anymore. It's about what happens after, when the gods try to put the smoke back in the chimney, the secret back in the jar. Back on Earth, Pandora is curious. Of course she is. She was made to be. The jar sits in her home, sealed and mysterious, and every day it whispers a little louder. What if it's full of something nice? And that, dear sleeper, is how all great stories and great catastrophes begin. But for now, let's let the jar sit. Let it simmer behind the scenes. Because on this cliff, with the wind howling and the stars turning slowly overhead, Prometheus shifts again. You glance over. His chains glint in the moonlight. The eagle has left for the night, beak slick, appetite sated. The mountain quiets, and still, he endures. Because even with his punishment, even with Zeus's backup revenge plans simmering like bad leftovers, the fire still burns. In the villages, in the minds of humans, in the defiant, tired eyes of a titan who knew exactly what he was doing. You wake to a sound that isn't wind. It's the crunch of hooves on gravel, the creak of something heavy being dragged, the faint jingle of divine accessories. Someone's approaching the mountain, and from Prometheus's expression, somewhere between annoyance and amused dread, you get the sense he already knows who it is. You squint down the winding path. There he is, Hermes, messenger of the gods, god of travelers, thieves, commerce, and anyone who fast walks through an airport terminal with 2 ambrosia lattes and a deadline. He's grinning. Of course he is. Morning, liver boy, he says, brushing snow off his sandals like someone arriving fashionably late to a very weird dinner party. How's the view? Prometheus doesn't answer. He's already seen the glint in Hermes' eyes. This isn't a social call. Hermes unrolls a scroll. It's long, flapping dramatically in the mountain wind, full of Zeus's florid penmanship and passive-aggressive punctuation. Let's see, Hermes mutters, squinting. Ah yes, henceforth let fire. Remain with humans, but let them also suffer consequences because I said so. Also, stop telling people I fell for the bones and fat trick. He pauses. That last part was underlined twice. Prometheus chuckles, a low, grumbly sound that echoes through the cliffside like a kettle almost ready to boil. Because now the plan is clear. Zeus has decided, fine, humans can keep their fire, but he's going to balance the scales. If Prometheus gives them warmth, Zeus will give them problems. So he dispatches Pandora. And now, you're back on Earth, drifting once again through early villages warmed by stolen flame, as a new kind of heat begins to rise, this time from curiosity. Pandora has arrived. She's radiant. Not just beautiful in the symmetrical, glowing way that goddesses often are, but fascinating. People want to listen when she speaks. Children follow her around like ducklings. Even goats seem to behave when she walks past. And in the corner of her simple clay home, the jar. It hums softly when no one's looking. It pulses with something unreadable, something waiting. Here's your curious historical tidbit of the night. In ancient Greek ritual, jars and urns were common symbols of containment, not just for food or water, but for spirits, curses, even abstract ideas like memory or grief. The Greeks saw jars as boundary objects, things that held mystery, things that, once opened, never quite closed the same way again. And this jar is no exception. You sit in the shadows as Pandora paces. Her fingers brush the lid, she bites her lip. She stares out the window. She tells herself she'll wait just one more day. She doesn't. With the softest of cracks, the jar's seal gives way. And what spills out? Not air, not dust, but trouble. Real, cosmic, archetypal trouble. Out swarm sickness and envy, greed and pestilence, fear and regret. They fly like insects made of shady. Ow, zipping past Pandora, past the goats, past the startled villagers, scattering across the earth like bad dreams with wings. You duck, but one brushes your ear with a hiss like cracked parchment. Pandora screams, not because she was evil or careless or cursed, but because she didn't know. And now it's too late. All the pain of the world is loosed. And the gods? They watch silently from their divine couches, sipping their heavenly wine and patting themselves on the back for a job well punished. Back on the cliff, Prometheus feels it. He doesn't see it happen, but he knows. His gift, his fire, now burns beside suffering. Warmth with worry, hope with heartbreak. And that was Zeus's move all along. Not to take back the fire, but to make it hurt. Prometheus closes his eyes. And here's where it gets strange. Because even as the last of the spirits escape, something small and pale remains in the jar. It flutters at the edge of the rim, unsure, fragile, a moth made of soft light. It is hope. And Pandora slams the lid shut before it can escape. Now, scholars still debate this part endlessly. Was hope meant to remain with humanity, trapped but available, like a silent companion in hard times? Or was Zeus trying to keep it from escaping, leaving the world with only suffering? The myths don't say. They just leave you with the image. A jar, mostly empty, but with one glowing ember sealed inside. Rather poetic, don't you think? Fire in the world, and hope in a jar. And all of it. All of it. Because one titan didn't want humans to shiver in the dark. Hermes, back on the mountain, finishes reading the scroll and sighs. Well, that's that. He looks at Prometheus, hesitates. You know, not for nothing, but some of us thought the barbecue trick was kind of brilliant. Prometheus raises one eyebrow. Hermes shrugs. Just saying. Personally, I think Zeus is overreacting, but you didn't hear it from me. And then he's gone, poofing into the ether like a guilty breeze. The eagle returns not long after. You look away this time. Because even though Prometheus endures it, you don't have to watch. Instead, you focus on the fires burning below, on the quiet flicker in the hearts of people now warmed, now pained, but still alive. Still human. Still dreaming. The wind smells like iron and storm breath as the eagle departs again, a lazy flap of its wings sending spirals of snow into the air. You watch Prometheus sag slightly in his chains, just a moment, just enough to exhale, and then straighten again. He always straightens, not because it helps, but because it's his ritual now. And tonight, something shifts. Because tonight, Prometheus decides to talk. Not to you specifically, but to the world, the mountains, the stars, or maybe just to keep his mind moving. You happen to be sitting close enough to listen. It wasn't always like this, he murmurs, eyes on the horizon. There was a time when gods didn't punish so quickly, when creation was chaos, but it was free. You glance at him, waiting. He doesn't blink. Back then, fire was everywhere. It didn't belong to anyone. It danced along mountain tops and lived inside volcanoes. It leapt from the sky and kissed the oceans. No god claimed it. No law assigned it. It just was. And then the Olympians came. Prometheus remembers when Zeus wasn't a king yet, when he was just another force among many, lightning with good hair and a loud voice. The Titans ruled then. Kronos sat on a throne of time and fear, and Prometheus, well, he was already thinking ahead. He pauses here, and you lean in, the cold forgotten. Most people think I fought for Zeus, he says slowly, but I fought for change. The old world was stagnant, bound by fear. The new one? Full of promise. Here's your historical tidbit. Greek mythology has always had a strange relationship with rebellion. Titans overthrew primordial gods. Olympians overthrew Titans. Heroes constantly defied authority, sometimes rewarded, sometimes punished. It was less about morality and more about balance, about keeping the fire of change alive. Prometheus, it seems, never forgot that. But now, chained to a cliff while his gift burns below, he wonders if he chose the right side. And then, a faint smile. I suppose that's the trick with forethought, he says. You always see the price, but you still pay it. You sit with that for a while. Far below, the human world continues to change. Fire has brought more than warmth. It's brought progress. People are shaping tools, forging bronze, baking bread that doesn't taste like damp moss. You drift through their lives like a wandering spirit. In one village, a woman teaches her daughter to heat metal until it glows. In another, a boy carves symbols into wet clay beside the firelight, inventing letters he doesn't know are revolutionary. The world is waking up, and Prometheus watches all of it from his perch of pain. But tonight, something else happens. A figure climbs the mountain, not an eagle, not a god, just a man, mortal. He carries no scroll, no armor, only a cloth bag slung over one shoulder and the determination of someone who's come a very long way to say something important. He pauses beneath the cliff, catching his breath, and shouts up, "You were right!" Prometheus blinks. He tilts his head, curious. "Fire changed everything," the man calls. "They said I was mad, but I built a forge. I made plows, I made wheels, I made light. My family doesn't freeze anymore." Prometheus says nothing, but you swear the wind carries a whisper of a smile. And then the man reaches into his bag and throws something up. It's a small bundle of bread, wrapped in cloth and still warm. It misses, lands in the snow 20 feet away. But it's the thought that counts. You both watch it steam gently in the cold air. A gift, a thank you, a moment of mortal kindness flung into the teeth of divine punishment. And that's when you realize, Prometheus isn't just a titan. He is the first martyr for progress, the first to suffer not for glory or power, but for a future he believed in. Now, fringe scholars have suggested that Prometheus's punishment wasn't just for the fire theft, but for giving humans too much. Fire, yes, but also knowledge, creativity, defiance. He broke the wall between mortal and divine just enough for people to wonder if they could climb it. And Zeus? Zeus couldn't stand the idea that someone might build a ladder. The stars glitter above, oblivious. The eagle is late again, probably circling elsewhere, looking for snacks. Prometheus turns to you now, for the first time. You see it, don't you? He asks. You nod. Because now you understand. The punishment wasn't just physical, it was isolation. Watching the world he loved grow up without him, watching the humans thrive and not being able to help anymore. And yet, he doesn't regret it. Not the barbecue trick, not the fennel stalk, not even the eagle. Because hope, remember, is still in that jar, and fire is still in their hands. You don't know how long you've been sitting there with him. Prometheus, the cliff, the wind, the aftertaste of bread in the snow. Time has softened, blurred. Night and day seem less like opposites and more like different shades of quiet. The eagle hasn't come. Maybe it's been fired. Maybe it's finally taking a day off. Or maybe something is shifting. Prometheus hasn't said a word in hours, but you don't need him to. You can feel the weight of his silence, like ancient stone pressed against the stars. And then, from down below, something strange rises. Not firelight, not smoke. Laughter. You hear children giggling, distant but distinct. The sound travels up the mountainside like a melody that's never been sung here before. It pierces the stillness. Prometheus tilts his head. You both listen. Down in the valley, people are playing. Someone's invented a game involving sticks and a rolling hoop. There's music, rudimentary, off-key, enthusiastic. Someone burns a pot of stew and laughs about it instead of crying. It smells like char and joy. Fire gave them more than tools, Prometheus mutters, almost to himself. It gave them time. That's the part Zeus didn't anticipate. When people stop scraping by just to survive, when their nights are no longer a battle against cold and fear, they start to imagine, to create, to sing, to play. And laughter is the first language of freedom. Now, if you've ever fallen asleep near a fire, you know the sound. That low crackle, like the earth is breathing. That occasional pop, like a secret escaping. It's a sound older than myth, and it's everywhere now. Prometheus hears it, even from here, and it's louder than the eagle's wings. He closes his eyes, not from pain, but from memory. And then, the past begins to flicker. Because there's more to this titan than fire. Much more. You begin to see fragments, visions, echoes of what came before the myth, before the chains. You see Prometheus sculpting the first humans from river clay and warm dust. His hands are gentle, his brow furrowed in concentration. He smooths eyebrows with his thumbs, adds calluses to palms, sculpts laughter lines around the mouths. He doesn't make them perfect. He makes them human. Zeus watches from afar, frowning. They look breakable, he says. They're supposed to, Prometheus replies. That's your fringe mythology fact for this section. In some versions of the myth, Prometheus isn't just the firebringer, he's the actual creator of mankind. Not a helper, not a tutor, the literal sculptor of human form. A divine potter with a head full of empathy and stubbornness. And maybe that's why he fought so hard for them, because he didn't see them as insect, just to be pitied, but as his children, his project, his proof. You drift deeper into that past. You watch him argue with the other gods, insisting humanity deserves more than scraps. That intelligence shouldn't be reserved for immortals. That warmth should be shared, not hoarded. They called him a traitor. He called them cowards. And in the end, he didn't wait for their permission. He never asked. He just gave. You snap back to the present with the sound of crunching snow. Someone's coming again, but this time, not Hermes. Not an eagle. A woman. She's bundled in furs, her hair streaked with gray, her hands calloused from years of work. She walks slowly but confidently, climbing toward the cliff with something in her arms. Prometheus watches silently. She reaches the ledge and kneels, doesn't speak. Then she unrolls a bundle. Inside is a tiny clay figurine, a human, roughly sculpted, arms wide, smiling. She places it on the ledge beneath Prometheus's chained feet and says softly, "My daughter made this. She said it looked like you." She doesn't wait for a reply, just nods, turns, and makes her way back down the path. Prometheus stares at the figure for a long time, doesn't blink. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "She did a good job." It's not just gratitude, it's recognition. Someone remembered. Someone taught her child the story. The myth has spread, not just as a warning, but as a thanks. And here's where the story tilts gently toward its next chapter. Because down in the human world, children are learning. They're learning to shape metal, to tame flame, to tell stories not just with words, but with rhythm, ink, and eventually, though Prometheus doesn't know it yet, with lightning itself. Fire has become more than warmth. It has become memory. You lean back against the cold rock. You breathe in the thin, ancient air. You close your eyes, and, just before you drift into that softer layer of sleep, you feel it. Prometheus shifts. And for the first time, he smiles with both eyes. Because he knows the fire has truly taken root. Because someone brought a figurine. Because someone remembered. The little clay figurine rests at Prometheus's feet, its smile broad and uneven, like a child had tried to sculpt joy itself, but only had a thumb and a stick to work with. Snowflakes dust its shoulders now. It doesn't seem to mind. Neither does Prometheus. He hasn't looked away from it for a while. There's something powerful in it. Not just the gift, not just the likeness, but what it means. It means the myth has made its way into the hands of mortals, into the little fingers of children playing beside a fire he gave them. That somewhere, a young girl thought to honor the chained titan on the mountain. That, despite Zeus's thunderbolts and jars and eagles, this part of the story couldn't be erased. You settle beside him, knees tucked to your chest, feeling the weight of the moment. And just like that, the mountain fades, and you find yourself drifting, no walking, through time again. Back to the village. Back to her. Pandora. She sits by her hearth now, alone, the infamous jar still sealed tight. Her fingers rest on the lid, but she doesn't open it. Not again. Not after what happened. She's not a villain, not even close, just curious, and beautifully, fatally human. And that's why the myth works. Because it wasn't rage or vengeance or greed that let the troubles loose. It was curiosity. The same quality that led humans to discover fire, to build cities, to write myths, to sculpt clay smiles with stubby fingers. You watch her poke the embers in her fire. She's become quieter lately, quieter and sadder. But here's the twist. She knows what she released. She lives among the consequences now. Sickness, sorrow, hardship, their daily life. But so is light, and laughter, and warmth. So is hope. And you remember, the jar. Hope didn't escape. It stayed behind, like a soft glow sealed in a cave, waiting. Why? Historians still argue about it, of course. Some say hope stayed in the jar to protect humans from disappointment. Others say it was kept hidden by Zeus as a final insult, an unreachable dream sealed away forever. But maybe it was left there on purpose, so you could choose when to let it out. Back on the mountain, Prometheus seems to feel that too. Another day passes. The eagle doesn't show. You both wait. Snow falls. The figurine remains, still smiling. Then, softly, gently, Prometheus begins to speak again. She didn't know what was in the jar, he says, voice low and rasped by centuries of mountain air. She wasn't a weapon, she was a mirror. You nod. Pandora wasn't created to destroy humanity. She was created to reflect it, to carry all the same questions, the same impulses, curiosity, longing, fear, and the willingness to open things just because they're closed. You know people like that. You are people like that. And so was she. Prometheus sighs, not sadly, just thoughtfully. I was angry at her, he admits. For a long time, thought she'd undone it all I gave, all I tried to change. Another pause. But she didn't undo the fire. She only made it harder to carry. And that somehow feels like the truest line you've heard all night. Because nothing was ever going to stay perfect. Fire brought light, yes, but it also brought danger. Tools can be weapons. Warmth can breed conflict. Knowledge can cut as easily as it heals. But you wouldn't give it back. None of it. And Prometheus knows that. In one forgotten version of the myth, one dusty corner of Hesiod's contradictions, it's suggested that Zeus wanted humans to suffer, that he offered the jar not as a punishment, but as a test, a way to see what mortals would do when handed pain along with progress. Would they curse the gods? Would they fall apart? Or would they carry on, see, airing hope like a spark in their pockets? Spoiler, you're still here. So is the fire. So is the jar. Pandora sits by hers still. Maybe she whispers to it. Maybe she's learned not to fear it, but to respect it, to hold it, sealed and glowing, a reminder that even the darkest stories can end with light. And far above, Prometheus closes his eyes again, not from pain, from peace, because he remembers now what he forgot during the worst of it. The fire didn't fix everything, but it started everything. He hears the laughter below. He sees the clay figure by his feet. He thinks of Pandora by her fire, keeping hope safe for another day. And for the first time in an age, he breathes in, not bracingly, not from agony, but softly. You settle back against the rock. The sky turns lavender with early stars. The wind loses its bite. No eagle. Not tonight. Maybe it's waiting too. The night stretches out like soft wool, wrapping the mountain in silence. The stars blink slower now. Even the wind moves more gently, like it doesn't want to disturb whatever's happening on the ridge. And you? You're barely awake, half lulled by the quiet, the cold, and Prometheus's breathing. Slow, measured, like someone waiting for an old friend who's very late but always shows up eventually. Below, the firelight flickers in human homes. And far from the mountain, we return to the story that almost unraveled everything, the love story that wasn't, the trap disguised as a gift. You're back with Epimetheus now. Remember him? Prometheus's younger brother. His name means afterthought, and he lives up to it with almost heroic consistency. You find him tending to a modest garden, oblivious to the cosmic chess game playing out over his head. The world has changed around him. Fire is in the villages, myths are spreading, and yet here he is, trying to graft two olive branches together like that's the biggest drama of the day. And then she arrives. Pandora. You watch the moment unfold, standing at the edge of the scene like a dreamless ghost. She appears with a smile, gentle, a little shy, completely sincere. There's no thunderclap, no dramatic music, just soft footsteps, a traveling cloak, and the world's most dangerous wedding present in a jar-shaped package. Epimetheus freezes mid-olive graft. His hands fumble. He blinks several times like he's forgotten what trees are. "Oh," he says. "Hello," Pandora replies. That's it. That's how the end begins. Now Prometheus had warned him, of course. Don't accept any gifts from Zeus, he'd said, especially ones that arrive with their own lighting. But Epimetheus, bless his completely functional heart, falls for her immediately. And who can blame him? She's kind, Thoughtful, she bakes, she sings, she organizes the clay pots alphabetically and remembers birthdays. If she's a divine trap, she's the most appealing one in recorded history. So Epimetheus accepts the gift. Accepts her. The jar sits in the corner of their home like a forgotten suitcase after a long trip. No one opens it. Not at first. It's not exactly a centerpiece, and yet its presence changes everything, quietly, like mold. Now here's your mythological nugget of the night. Scholars still debate what exactly was in Pandora's jar. Some say evils, others say spirits. Others interpret it as symbolic burdens. Aging, pain, taxes. That one guy at symposia who won't stop quoting Homer. Whatever it was never meant to be opened. And yet, curiosity, as always, simmers beneath the surface. You can feel it in Pandora. She doesn't plan to open the jar. She really doesn't. She's not malicious. She's not nosy. She's human. And humanity? Well, we don't do well with do not touch signs. She tries everything to resist, covers it with cloth, pushes it behind a shelf, tries to forget it's there. But the jar hums. It pulses faintly, like a heart, beat made of secrets. And one night, perhaps when Epimetheus is asleep, or maybe just outside arguing with a goat, she lifts the lid. It's not dramatic at first. No explosion, no flash of lightning, just a whisper, then a hiss, then everything. Grief, envy, hunger, disease, misfortune, taxes probably. A swarm of intangible miseries pour out like mist made of nightmares. They flood the home, the garden, the village, the sky. Pandora screams, not because she was tricked, but because she understands. She wasn't just carrying a trap. She was part of the trap, and she was used. You sit beside her as she drops to her knees, overwhelmed. Epimetheus returns, sees what's happened, and, well, bless him, he doesn't rage. He doesn't blame. He just sits beside her and holds her hand. Because that's all anyone can do now. And then they hear it. A sound from inside the jar. One last thing. Soft, small, glowing. Hope. Now, in most versions of the myth, hope remains in the jar. She never escapes. She lives there still, like a nightlight left burning in an otherwise empty room. But some say Pandora opened the lid just a crack and let her out. And that's the version Prometheus believes in. Because on the mountain, his smile has changed. It's no longer defiant. It's not smug, or patient, or tired. It's proud. Because this is what it was all for. He didn't give humans fire so they could build temples or invent metallurgy or discover charcoal face masks. He gave them fire so they could survive the jar. So they could live in a world with grief and still laugh. So they could hold a hand in the darkness and whisper, "It's going to be okay." Prometheus breathes deeply. The clay figure is still there at his feet. A child's token. A spark made solid. And you? You feel it too. Not just warmth, not just light, but hope. Small, defiant, glowing. Waiting in your chest, like a jar gently cracked open. The sky has changed. It's subtle, but you notice it. The stars are no longer sharp pinpricks. They soften, blur slightly at the edges, like someone turned Tao. And the contrast on the universe. And in the east, there's a faint blush. Sunrise still a rumor, but making its quiet entrance. Prometheus hasn't spoken since you last glanced at him. His eyes are half closed. Not asleep, but deeply still. You think about what you've heard. About the jar. About Pandora. About Epimetheus, sitting quietly beside her. No blame, no shouting. Just presence. It's a detail often skipped in retellings, but here, in this slow version, it lingers, and you can feel why. Because the myth isn't just about what escapes the jar, it's about what remains afterward. On the surface, everything should be ruined. Troubles fly free, chaos reigns, pain becomes permanent. And yet, humans don't give up. They build temples, they farm, they laugh, they keep going. Even with the worst of it buzzing around them like invisible bees, they press on. Prometheus opens one eye. They surprise you, don't they? You nod. He's not asking for an answer. And then, almost reluctantly, the eagle returns. You hear it before you see it. A familiar screech, like a bronze hinge in a bad mood. The flap of wings, the gust of cold feathers on wind. Prometheus doesn't flinch. Neither do you. But something feels different now. The eagle perches like it always does, but slower, less eager, as if even it is starting to question the point of all this. The liver, the repetition, the God-issued mandate that feels less righteous with each passing century. It begins its work, but Prometheus? He just watches the sunrise. You do too. Because here's something not everyone realizes. The Prometheus myth isn't about fire versus no fire, or punishment versus reward. It's about resilience, about enduring the unendurable, about watching everything go wrong, and still believing it might go right again. Which brings us to tonight's curious historical footnote. There's an ancient Greek vos, weathered, faded, cracked in all the right poetic ways, that shows Prometheus not chained, but walking free. No eagle, no blood, just a staff, a cloak, and a burning branch in one hand. This image puzzled scholars for ages. Was it wishful thinking? A mistake? Or some version of the myth where he escapes? Maybe. Or maybe the artist simply knew something, that even if the punishment continues, the story changes. Because people started telling it differently. At first, Prometheus was just a rebel punished, then a teacher, then a symbol, and eventually, a hero. That's the real escape. Not from the chains, but from the meaning of the chains. Back in the village, you visit a workshop. A woman is shaping iron tools beside her furnace. Her hands are blistered, her brow streaked with soot. She hums a tune passed down from someone who once whispered it beside firelight. She has no idea she's part of a divine rebellion. She just needs to finish the sickle before planting season. Next door, a child listens as his grandfather tells the story of the Titan who gave humans fire. The child interrupts halfway through. But why didn't Zeus just share? The grandfather laughs, rubs his beard, and says, well, because then we wouldn't have stories. And the child thinks that's a pretty good trade. You drift back toward the mountain. The eagle departs once again. It doesn't screech this time, just lifts into the morning wind like a leaf, vanishing into the clouds with the quiet resignation of a mythical employee who knows retirement is coming eventually. Prometheus shifts, slowly. He looks relieved? Maybe not quite, but something lighter. Even the eagle's getting bored, he mutters. You smirk. Maybe Zeus needs a new punishment. Prometheus chuckles. He already gave it to himself. He made humans think. And there it is, the barb, the real trick. Not the bones and fat barbecue, not even the fire. The idea that humans could change the world. Zeus can chain a titan to a rock. He can send eagles. He can unleash sorrows in jars. But he cannot make people. Stop wondering, or stop building, or stop telling stories by firelight. Because Prometheus didn't just light the first flame. He lit the mind. And even gods have trouble putting that out. The sun finally edges above the horizon now, casting long golden shadows across the rock. The snow begins to melt in tiny rivulets that sparkle as they trickle downward. The little clay figure at Prometheus's feet catches the light. It gleams. You lean back, watching him watch the sky. And for a moment, just one fleeting moment, you could almost believe that even this punishment, even this frozen monument to defiance, might thaw someday. Until then, Prometheus waits, and you wait with him. The sun climbs slowly, spilling warmth over the craggy slopes like honey over ancient bread. It doesn't do much to melt the chains, but it softens the sky, turning that harsh high-altitude blue into something friendlier. The rock beneath Prometheus glows faintly golden now, and you notice something for the first time: moss. Thin, brave, clinging to a shaded crevice. Even here, things try to grow. You and Prometheus sit in silence. The eagle, having completed its shift, is nowhere to be seen, maybe off filing its torture mileage paperwork. But the quiet doesn't last. You hear footsteps again, different ones this time. Not divine, not mortal, heavier. Familiar in a way that makes the mountain itself seem to perk up, like an old friend roused from a long nap. A figure appears on the path. Muscles, beard, lion-skin cloak, club bigger than most small gods. It's that guy. Heracles, son of Zeus, walking contradiction. The human-god hybrid who solved problems mostly by hitting them, then apologizing after. He's here, and he's not sightseeing. Prometheus watches him approach with a look that says, "Oh no, not this guy." Heracles squints up at the chained titan, shades his eyes from the sun, and yells, "Hey, you the one with the liver problem?" Prometheus sighs. "It's not contagious." You stifle a laugh. Heracles drops his bag and looks around. "Right. So, I was told to come free you. Something about fulfilling a prophecy. You know how it is. 12 labors, side quests, bonus points with Dad. Honestly, I stopped keeping track." Prometheus doesn't answer. You can see the caution in his eyes. Zeus's son standing here with a club and a hero complex? This could go several ways. But Heracles surprises you. He kneels beside the little clay figure first, picks it up gently, examines it. "Nice work," he mutters, then sets it back down like it's sacred. Then he stands, raises his bow, yes, bow, and knocks a shimmering arrow that hums with divine energy. He doesn't aim at the chains. He aims at the sky. "Come on out, bird brain," he mutters. Right on cue, the eagle appears, wings spread wide, letting out a shriek that probably echoes across myth itself. It dives. Heracles waits, just long enough to make it look cool, then looses the arrow. It hits. The eagle explodes into feathers and offended squawks and plummets somewhere into the clouds with a noise like a thunderclap stepping on a rake. Silence follows. Even Prometheus blinks. Then, Heracles walks up and, without ceremony, snaps the chains. They break. Like dried ivy. Like brittle thread. You almost don't believe it. Prometheus stumbles forward, catching himself on the rock. His arms are covered in old bruises, scars, burns, but he's free. No chains, no eagle, no sentence. He stands there, swaying slightly, and you feel like history just hiccuped. You want to cheer, to throw a feast, to shout Zeus's full name into a jar and bury it. But Prometheus? He just breathes, deeply, once, twice, and says, "You're late." Heracles grins. Had to find the right bow. Now, your curious mythology note for the night. According to some traditions, it was Heracles who freed Prometheus, and Zeus allowed it, but only after Prometheus promised never to reveal a certain prophecy about Zeus's downfall. That's right. Even chained and pecked, Prometheus had leverage, and he used it. You watch as Prometheus picks up the clay figure at his feet. He turns it in his hands slowly, like he's memorizing every line, every imperfection, then tucks it gently into the folds of his cloak. He nods once to Heracles. Then he begins to walk. No grand speech, no lightning bolt moment, just one foot in front of the other. Down, off the mountain, back into the world he gave fire to. You follow, quietly. The path isn't easy. His legs aren't used to walking after so long, but he doesn't complain. He doesn't stop. Somewhere down the slope, a bird sings. Not the eagle, just an ordinary one. Small, cheerful, off-key. Prometheus smiles. Not because it's over, but because something new has begun. Far below, villagers look up at the mountain and squint at the strange procession. A burly demigod, a slightly limping titan, and, well, you, half awake and full of awe. No one knows what to say, and no one needs to, because the fire is still burning, the jar is still closed, and Prometheus is walking again, which, in this myth, is as close to a happy ending as anyone ever gets. The mountain behind you fades into the clouds, no longer a prison but just another part of the landscape. You glance back once, just to be sure. The chains lie in the snow like forgotten jewelry. The wind tugs at them gently, as if trying to decide what to do with such outdated symbols of control. Prometheus walks ahead of you now, his steps slow but certain. His cloak flaps lightly around him, and the little clay figure is still tucked safely inside. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. The silence feels different now, less like punishment, more like recovery. You reach a ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the world unfolds. It's greener than before. Trees stretch tall, rivers flash like blades in the morning sun. You see a village, not far away, smoke curling lazily from rooftops. Somewhere, a dog barks. Children chase each other between mud brick homes. Someone burns breakfast and laughs. It's so ordinary, so full of fire and chaos and life. Prometheus leans on a rock. It's changed, he murmurs. You nod. Because of you. He gives a tired smile. Because of them. And then, slowly, he sits. His first time sitting on real earth in ages. Not stone, not ice, but warm dirt, buzzing with insects and damp with dew. He presses his hands into it. The ground accepts him like an old friend. Now here's a strange little historical tidbit to chew on while you settle beside him. In some lesser-known versions of the myth, Prometheus didn't just return to the world after being freed. He taught. He wandered from village to village, sharing knowledge, agriculture, astronomy, medicine, bread recipes. He became something like a wandering professor who smelled faintly of smoke and divine rebellion. No thrones, no temples. Just practical wisdom passed down in whispers by firelight. And maybe that's the greatest part of the myth. Not the fire, not the chains, but what came after. The idea that even the most punished figure in mythology didn't retreat into bitterness, but chose to give more. You watch him now as a young boy approaches, barefoot, bold, curious, the way all children are when they sense a story wrapped in wrinkles and silence. Are you the man from the story? The boy asks. Prometheus looks at him. Which one? The one with the eagle, the boy says, and the mountain, and the fire. Prometheus raises an eyebrow. That's a lot of stories. The boy grins. My father says you gave us fire, but Zeus didn't like it. Prometheus smirks. Your father sounds accurate. The boy sits cross-legged, egged in the grass, expectant. Tell me. Prometheus pauses, then reaches into his cloak and pulls out the clay figure. It's still intact, a little worn now, smudged from the road, but unmistakable. He hands it to the boy. She made this for me, he says quietly. Someone like you, a long way from here. The boy turns it over in his hands. She's good at making people. She is, Prometheus replies. Now you tell her story someday. And there it is again. The cycle. The myth. not as marble or thunder, but as memory. You lie back in the grass and watch the clouds swirl above. The sun filters through them like warm milk, and for a moment, the entire world feels like it's exhaling. Somewhere nearby, villagers gather for lunch. They bring bread, herbs, dried olives. Prometheus is handed a wooden bowl of something steaming. He raises it in thanks, not like a god, but like someone who remembers what cold feels like. And then he eats. Slowly, carefully, as if each bite is a secret being learned all over again. The village elder leans over and asks, "Will you stay?" Prometheus doesn't answer right away, because that's not how he works. He's never stayed long. He's a giver, a spark, a whisper in the shadows of civilization. But he looks around, the children, the laughter, the clay ovens puffing out little clouds of flour and smoke, and says, "For a while." And that, for him, is a promise. Now for a final bit of sleepy speculation. Some fringe scholars believe that Prometheus became so connected with humanity that over time, he faded into them. Not died, not disappeared, just became the fire inside. Not the literal one, but the internal spark that makes people question, challenge, learn, create. He is the muse of curiosity, the ghost of rebellion, the patron saint of not leaving things alone just because someone says, "Don't touch." And he's still here, in ever, immaculate, in every story told, in every child who asks why, instead of how high. The sun slips behind a cloud again, the light softens, the laughter dims into conversation, then hums, then just settles. Prometheus leans back against a tree, hands resting on his knees, and for the first time in eons, he sleeps. He sleeps so deeply, so peacefully, you almost don't want to breathe too loud. Prometheus, the titan who endured centuries of agony, now curled against the base of a tree like someone who's finally let go of holding the sky on his back. His chest rises and falls in a rhythm as old as myth and as human as a nap after lunch. You stay nearby, stretched out in the tall grass, watching the clouds drift above like lazy ships. The sun dapples the earth. You hear bees. A woman hums as she sweeps her doorway with a bundle of reeds. There's the clink of pottery, the scent of fresh bread. It's hard to believe this same world once shivered in cold silence, before fire. But that's what Prometheus gave them, and what Zeus tried so very hard to take away. Which brings us to the thread we tug at tonight, the prophecy. It's not mentioned in every version of the myth, but in the oldest whispers, the ones traded by flickering firelight or scribbled in margins by half-mad poets, there's mention of a secret Prometheus kept, something even Zeus feared. You drift closer now, into that ancient thread, into the heart of the quiet war between Titan and Olympian. According to the old stories, Prometheus knew something, a truth, a glimpse of the future. Specifically, that Zeus would one day be overthrown, not by another Titan, not by an enemy, but by his own son. Now Zeus, famously allergic to surprises, wanted to know which woman he should never lie with, because one of them, supposedly, would bear the child that ended his reign. And Prometheus knew who it was, but he refused to tell. That's the deeper root of the punishment, some say. Not just fire, theft, but silence. The gall of a lesser being refusing to share vital information with the king of gods. You imagine the Olympian council meeting, thunder, threats, celestial paperwork. Hera sighing dramatically, Hermes taking notes, and Prometheus standing there, arms folded, simply saying, "No." And Zeus? Zeus doesn't handle no, so he chained him. And still, Prometheus didn't speak. Now here's where things get cloudy, even for mythology. Some say Zeus eventually relented. He allowed Heracles to free Prometheus on the condition that the Titan finally spill the prophecy. Others suggest Prometheus only pretended to offer it, using riddles and half-truths to keep the power in his own hands. And some more philosophical scholars? They argue that the prophecy wasn't real at all, that Prometheus made it up, not to deceive, but to balance the power, to keep Zeus afraid, to remind the gods that no throne lasts forever. You glance over at Prometheus, still sleeping beneath the tree. His face is relaxed now, no signs of torment or secrets, but you can't help but wonder, did he ever tell Zeus? And more importantly, did it matter? Because here's the truth buried inside the myth, the piece most people miss when they skim past the eagle parts. Knowledge is its own form of rebellion. Prometheus didn't need to start a war. He started a rumor, a single idea that Zeus might not always rule, and that was enough. Fear works best in silence, but knowledge talks back. You walk into the village as the day stretches on. The people don't notice you, not exactly, but they seem to feel you there, like a warm breeze before a storm. A woman teaches her daughter to spin thread using a spindle heated gently near the fire. She says, "Watch how it warms. It listens better when it's soft." Across the square, a man carves tools from bronze. Sparks fly. His son watches, mouth open, eyes wide. There is no altar to Prometheus here, but there is a legacy, a way of doing things. Curious, careful, defiant. And you understand now, Prometheus didn't come back to be praised. He came to make sure they were still thinking, still building, still lighting their own way. The boy with the clay figure returns in the late afternoon. He carries it like a treasure, hands cradling it gently. He holds it out to one of the elders, who nods and says, "Tell me the story again." And the boy does, in his own words, with new details, with laughter, with confusion, with wonder. He gets parts wrong. He invents some new ones, but the fire of it is still there. Prometheus opens his eyes as the sun starts to dip. He listens to the boy's retelling, smiling faintly. He doesn't correct him, because the story was never meant to stay the same. It was meant to burn. You sit beside him again as dusk begins to stretch long shadows across the fields. The trees hum. The air cools. Prometheus finally speaks, voice low. "Zeus wanted fear to be stronger than fire, but I knew better." You nod. He continues. "Fear burns fast, but fire, real fire, burns slow. It spreads. It settles. It stays. The wind rustles through the grass." He looks up at the stars, just now beginning to flicker. They'll never put it out. And you know he's right, because the fire is in them now. The people, the stories, the silence, and the sparks. Evening settles like velvet over the village. A goat bleats in the distance, unsure whether it wants to be indoors or dramatically outside. The sky deepens into a soft indigo, and the first stars blink awake, shy at first, then bold. It's the hour when everything slows down. Meals are finished, lamps are lit, parents hush their children with sleepy warnings about wood sprites or wandering shadows. You sit with Prometheus on the edge of a communal fire pit, where someone has just kindled the evening flames. A boy fans the embers with a woven mat, and the sparks leap like tiny dancers. The villagers don't crowd Prometheus. They offer food, and a stool, and then go back to their routines, as if they sense that this isn't a god who wants worship, just warmth. He accepts a bowl of lentil stew without comment, eats slowly. No eagle, no thunderbolts, no prophecies tonight, just dinner. But the quiet doesn't last forever. You hear the question before it's even spoken aloud. It's in the air, on every tongue, behind every glance cast in his direction. Was it worth it? They don't say it, but they think it. You can feel it in the flicker of firelight on their faces. Not accusation, just honest wondering, and maybe a little awe. Prometheus looks into the flames, as if the answer might be hiding among the coals. Finally, he speaks, softly, to you, to the fire, maybe to himself. I knew it would cost me. I just didn't know how much. You wait. And I didn't do it expecting thanks, he adds. That's not how giving works. Now here's something peculiar that scholars rarely discuss. For all his legendary defiance, Prometheus isn't remembered as vengeful. He never plotted against Zeus after his release, never demanded worship, never tried to take over Olympus. Instead, he gave more. In some versions of the story, Prometheus travels. He teaches. He heals. He becomes a kind of wandering spark himself, lighting up minds wherever he goes. A titan reduced to a whisper. A mentor. A myth folded into the roots of human progress. That's the version you feel now, sitting beside him in the glow of the fire. The boy with the clay figure returns again. He's made another one. This one has wings. It's the bird, he says solemnly. Prometheus smiles. The eagle? The boy nods. But I made him small, so he can't eat anything. The entire fire circle chuckles. Even Prometheus lets out a low, warm laugh, his first real one. The boy hands him the eagle figurine. Prometheus holds it next to the original little clay version of himself. He arranges them both carefully in the dirt, side by side. They're not enemies anymore, he says. The villagers settle in, and slowly the stories begin. Not from Prometheus, but from the people. A grandmother tells how fire taught her to save her crops from frost. A young man describes how he lit his forge for the first time, and how scared he was until he saw the flame dancing instead of roaring. A girl speaks shyly about how she writes little poems by the hearth when no one's watching, and every single story ends the same way. Because we had fire. Prometheus says nothing, but you can tell he's listening. The kind of deep listening that doesn't just hear, it holds. The stories continue. They talk about hard winters, about illness, about grief, but always with a flicker of something underneath. Survival, invention, light, hope. And that's when it hits you. Zeus didn't lose because the fire got stolen. He lost because the stories got told. Because fire spreads, yes, but stories linger. Even now, even here, the myth burns quietly behind every word spoken in the circle. You think back, again, to the prophecy, the one Prometheus kept secret for so long. And now you wonder, was it real, or was it just a spark? The idea that no king is permanent, that even gods must change. You glance at Prometheus, hoping for a clue, but he only lifts his bowl to his lips and drinks the last of the broth, as if prophecy is something that belongs in the bottom of a meal, not the top. People always ask about the end, he says after a moment. When will Zeus fall? When will the suffering stop? He stares into the fire, but they rarely ask what comes after. You tilt your head. What do you think comes after? You ask. He shrugs. Maybe nothing. Maybe something better. Maybe just people, living, carrying the fire forward. That would be enough. You believe him. Because this isn't a myth about endings. It's a myth about continuity, about handing the spark to the next hand, and the next, and the next, until it burns everywhere, until it burns quietly. The village elder stokes the fire. The smoke rises. The stars stretch wide. And Prometheus, freed and full, rests his head on his hands and closes his eyes again. Not to sleep this time, but to listen. Because the fire is speaking now, and its stories are warm. The fire crackles low, softening into that late-night lull where even the coals seem drowsy. The villagers have dispersed. The clay figurines sit quietly in their place, one of Prometheus, still smiling, one of the eagle, wings tucked in submission. You're still here, of course. You've come too far to leave now. Besides, the air is warm, and Prometheus has begun to hum. It's not a song you recognize, just a slow, wordless tune. It wobbles like an old memory. Maybe something the Titans used to sing to each other before the Olympians crashed the party. Maybe just something he made up to keep the silence company during all those centuries on the cliff. Whatever it is, it keeps you anchored. Eventually he speaks. You ever wonder, he asks without looking at you, if it was supposed to be this way? You tilt your head. If the fire, the punishment, the jar, the boy with the clay bird, if all of it was inevitable. That's a big question to drop at bedtime, but he's not asking for answers. He's just laying the thought gently into the air like a feather, letting it drift. And it gets you thinking. Because maybe the myth isn't about mistakes and revenge. Maybe it's about balance. Zeus, the enforcer. Prometheus, the giver. Pandora, the reminder that nothing comes without risk. Heracles, the fixer who shows up late but still gets credit. Humanity, stumbling forward with pockets full of embers and bruises. You think about how fire itself is both life and danger, comfort and destruction, kitchen hearth and forest blaze. Maybe the story reflects that duality. Maybe it has to. Prometheus seems to sense your thoughts. He tosses another stick on the fire and it flares briefly before settling into a soft orange glow. You know, he says, I used to be so angry. You glance over. He's not grim, just honest. Angry at Zeus, at the eagle, at the people for not knowing what I gave up. He pokes the fire with a stick. But eventually, you get tired of being angry, and you realize the only thing that lasts longer than punishment is purpose. That might be your new favorite quote. Was that your purpose? You ask. To give them fire? He smiles faintly. No, my purpose was to make sure they never stopped asking questions. You let that sit. And you realize that is the fire. Not just the flame in a clay bowl, but the urge to understand, to know more, to try anyway. That's what Zeus couldn't stand. Not the heat, the doubt. You lean back, watching the smoke rise into the night. It doesn't go straight up. It coils, meanders, slips sideways through the stars. Prometheus follows your gaze. Some say I should have given them obedience instead, he says. Rules, boundaries, the kind of knowledge that keeps people small. But you didn't, you reply. He chuckles. No, I gave them the messy kind, the kind that makes you late for dinner and question the sun. The fire pops, agreeing. Here's your fringe mythology fact for the hour. In some pre-Olympian traditions, Prometheus wasn't seen as a rebel at all, but as a sacred intermediary, a bridge between the divine and mortal. Not a thief, but a translator, the one who understood both languages, that of stars and that of soil. You like that version, because it means Prometheus isn't just the bringer of fire, he's the first teacher. And like all good teachers, he doesn't give you all the answers. He gives you the tools to find them. Around you, the village grows still. Somewhere, an infant cries softly. Somewhere else, a dog yawns audibly, then sighs in that dramatic way only dogs can. And Prometheus? He's humming again. That same wordless tune. You hum along without realizing it. And for a few timeless minutes, there's no mountain, No chains, no godly grudges. Just two people sitting by a fire, sharing warmth, sharing silence, and sharing an old, forgotten song that doesn't need lyrics. Just heat, just breath, just memory. When the fire finally sinks to glowing embers, Prometheus stirs. We should rest. Do titans even sleep? You ask. Only after very long conversations, he replies. You lay back in the grass, head tilted toward the stars. You swear they've moved closer. And Prometheus? He leans back against the log, eyes closed, mouth still curled in something that's not quite a smile, but not far from it either. The last spark in the fire flares, then fades, but the heat lingers. It always does. Morning again. The kind of morning where mist rises slowly from the fields like the land is still trying to wake up. Dew clings to grass blades. Chickens complain faintly in their coops. Smoke from breakfast fires twists into sleepy spirals over the rooftops. And Prometheus? He's gone. You blink, sit up, scan the clearing. No footprints, no cloak, not even a dent in the grass where he'd been leaning. It's like he dissolved into the dawn, but the clay figurines remain. The little smiling titan, the tiny eagle with non-threatening wings. Someone's placed them side by side on a flat stone near the fire pit. Offerings, maybe, or souvenirs, or a kind of mythic punctuation mark at the end of a very long, very strange sentence. You rise slowly, stretching the stiffness from your limbs. And as you walk into the village, something feels different. It's not the people. They're still moving with that early day rhythm, feeding animals, stoking fires, sweeping thresholds. It's not the smell. Still bread, still smoke, still goats. It's the air, sharper, cleaner, more awake. Like the world exhaled something heavy overnight. And then you realize the story has changed. Not ended, not erased, just shifted. Because Prometheus doesn't need to stay. His presence isn't the point. It never was. The fire burns in the people now, in their hands, in their habits, in their jokes and questions and stubborn attempts to improve breakfast porridge. You find the boy again, the one who made the figurines. He's holding a lump of new clay, shaping something, focused, tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth. What are you making now? You ask. A new story, he says. And just like that, you understand. Prometheus hasn't left. He's just moved in. Not into houses or temples, but into hearts. Into myths retold by sleepy children and elders with long memories. Into the rhythm of tools and wheels and questions. Into the act of making. Because what is fire, really, but transformation? What is Prometheus, if not the symbol of change you choose, even when it costs you? You follow the boy as he carries the lump of clay to the fire pit. He sets it beside the older figurines and steps back. This one's not finished, he says. I'm going to wait and see what it wants to be. You smile. That's exactly the kind of thing Prometheus would approve of. Now, your quirky scholarly tidbit for this chapter. There was a tiny cult, barely documented, mostly footnotes, that worshipped Prometheus not as a god, but as a principle, the spirit of spark. They didn't pray to him, they imitated him. They created, resisted, questioned. Their symbol? A spiral flame wrapped around an open hand. You'd fit right in. You step away from the village for a moment, just to breathe. To look out over the hills, the forest, the slow-chugging smoke trails of humanity continuing to rise. It's quieter out here. and you hear something. Not speech, not music, just a low rustle of possibility. Because now that Prometheus is Jia, 1. The question isn't what he'll do next. It's what you will. Will you tell someone this story? Will you remember it when your hands shape something? Will you look at a flame and think not of heat, but of beginnings? Back in the village, the clay pieces wait, unattended, unguarded, available. A girl walks up, picks up the eagle. She giggles. His wings are silly. Then she sets it gently back and walks on. Prometheus would be proud, because he didn't just give fire. He gave us freedom. The freedom to wonder. The freedom to reshape myths. The freedom to say, that eagle doesn't scare me anymore, and mean it. You walk alone now, away from the village, into the edge of the woods where shadows stretch long and cool. There's a rhythm here, crickets murmuring, birds rearranging their feathers, tree branches adjusting in the breeze like they're waking from long naps. The path beneath your feet is soft with pine needles, and the light filters down in lazy gold streaks. This is the kind of place where stories settle. Not loudly, not dramatically, just gently, like leaves. And here, tonight, we circle back to the barbecue. You remember it, don't you? The first sleight of hand. The moment Prometheus laid out 2 sacrifices for Zeus at the feast of Mycone, one pile fat-wrapped and hollow, the other disguised with guts but rich underneath. Zeus, drawn to appearances, picked the sparkling pile of bones, and humanity got the meat. You've heard it now from Prometheus's side. But as you walk deeper into the trees, it's worth asking, was it a trick or was it something else? Because on one level, sure, it was misdirection. The divine equivalent of hiding the good snacks behind a bag of frozen peas. But on another level, it was a mirror. Prometheus didn't lie. He laid out the truth in 2 piles. He just knew how gods think. And Zeus? Zeus chose the one that loves, oaked better. Here's your sleepy scholarly note of the night. Some ancient Greek thinkers argued that this moment, the sacrifice at Mycone, wasn't a prank at all, but a lesson. A commentary on the nature of divinity. That the gods, for all their power, were still vulnerable to appearances. That wisdom meant seeing through fat to find substance. That sometimes the gift that smells worst is the one worth opening. It's barbecue logic, yes, but it's also cosmic philosophy. You pass under a low branch and the scent of old firewood reaches you. Someone nearby is roasting something. Flatbread, maybe. Olives. Cheese on a hot stone. And it strikes you. That moment at Mycone is still happening. Every day, in every home. Every time someone chooses depth over shine. Every time someone says, I know what it looks like, but I'll look closer. Prometheus didn't just win a meal. He changed the rules. From then on, sacrifices would follow that pattern. Gods get the outward beauty, mortals get the real sustenance. It's not just ritual, it's rebellion baked into religion. And that's the quiet genius of Prometheus. He didn't shout. He didn't conquer. He tweaked the system, just enough to let doubt in, just enough to give mortals a foot in the door. You pause now in a small clearing where someone has built a fire ring of stones. It's cold, unused for days, maybe weeks, but as you crouch beside it, you see something tucked in the ashes. A burned bone, wrapped in old, melted fat. An echo. Someone remembered. You sit for a while, staring at it, and you think, barbecue logic isn't just about deception, it's about what you do with what you're given. Zeus chose the shiny lie. Prometheus let him. But humans? We took the meat. We built fire pits and families and civilizations around it. We learned to wait for substance beneath the surface. We learned to taste the truth. And the gods? They just kept chewing on bones. You head back toward the village slowly, feet quiet on the path. The clay figures are still there when you arrive. Someone's moved them onto a little shelf near the fire pit, like household guardians, like memory, hardened and harmless now. Prometheus isn't here, but he is, in the rituals, in the laughter, in the bones we leave behind after long meals and longer stories, and in that funny, strangely brilliant truth he taught us, that sometimes the fat glistens just to hide the bones, and sometimes the scraps, the leftovers, the clay-stained corners of history are where the gods get outsmarted. It's the quietest hour of the night, not quite midnight, not yet dawn, just that in-between hush where the world holds its breath, unsure whether to keep dreaming or start waking. You're back at the fire pit now, where the clay figures sit like sentinels, watching, waiting, remembering. The flames have burned down to embers. You draw your fingers close and feel their gentle pulse, not fierce, not hungry, just present, like a heartbeat that never quite fades. And tonight, it's time to visit the stories that didn't survive the scrolls. Because for every version of the Prometheus myth you've heard, there are 10 more that slipped through cracks in the marble. Tales told by travelers, fishermen, shepherds, people who weren't poets, but still needed their own reasons to understand the fire and the sky and the ache behind their ribs when they asked, "Why is the world like this?" These versions? They're quieter, stranger, less polished. And you're going to love them. In one forgotten tale whispered in the mountains of Arcadia, Prometheus is never chained at all. Instead, Zeus gives him a choice: silence and comfort, or rebellion and pain. And Prometheus simply walks away, carrying the fire in his bare hands, burning but unflinching, choosing exile over obedience. In another, he and Pandora speak, not just as player and pawn, but as equals. They meet after the jar is opened, and she begs forgiveness. But Prometheus, ever the long thinker, simply says, "You did what they built you to do. Now do something new." In a wild fringe tale preserved only in a line of an ancient weathered play fragment, Prometheus survives not because of Heracles, but because humanity builds a ladder of fire, torches lit and stacked skyward, until the light reaches the cliff and the eagle flees in confusion. There's even one myth where Prometheus isn't a titan at all, but a future human, time-traveling backward to gift his primitive ancestors the one tool they need to build the world he came from. Historians roll their eyes at that one. But you? You grin. Because that's the point. Prometheus doesn't belong to the tidy shelf of myths. He's slippery. He slides through categories: hero, trickster, teacher, victim, god, man, spark. And that's why he survives. Not because the story is fixed, but because it keeps shifting. Because it belongs to the storytellers. To the children who sculpt figurines in his image and whisper their own versions into the embers. To you, to us. The clay eagle glows faintly in the firelight now. Someone's rubbed it with oil, maybe. Its tiny eyes reflect a dancing spark. The Titan figure next to it leans slightly to the left. Too much fire drying, maybe. But that tilt makes him look like he's listening. And if you lean in close, you could swear you hear something. Not words, not music, just the echo of old myths learning to breathe again. Because that's the final trick Prometheus pulled. He made the story ours. He didn't keep it behind divine gates, locked in scrolls or etched in gold. He gave it away. In smoke. In bone. In glowing embers, and reluctant gods, and jars full of trouble, and the stubborn joy of mortals who say, "So what?" and keep living anyway. You sit back on your heels and look at the stars. They're quiet tonight. No thunder. No judgment. Just ancient lights watching over their most troublesome child. And you wonder, if Zeus is still watching, what he thinks now, Did the fire win, or did he? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe Prometheus knew it all along. That in the end, there is no winning. There's just enduring, creating, teaching, becoming, and telling stories about fire long after the embers cool. You wake before the sun. The village is still asleep, roofs tucked under morning mist, hearths not yet stirred, the clay figurines dewed with soft silver. It's quiet in that way only early mornings can be, not empty, but expectant, like the world is holding its first breath. You wrap yourself in your cloak, or maybe just the warmth of everything you've heard, and step softly through the cool grass. The embers at the fire pit are dark now, spent, but you don't need them anymore, because the fire is in you. And this, more than anything, is what Prometheus wanted. Not for you to worship him, not to fear the gods, but to carry the spark forward. To keep asking, keep making, keep wondering. You return one last time to the clay figures, the titan, the eagle, the unfinished shape the boy left near them. Just a lump with 2 thumbprints pressed into its side. It looks like nothing, or maybe it looks like what's next. You sit beside it all and close your eyes, and you begin to remember. Not just the famous parts, not just the chained cliff and the stolen fire, but the quiet parts. The moment Prometheus hummed beside the embers. The child sculpting his myth with sticky fingers. The way he said, "You surprise me," and meant it as a compliment. You think of fire now, not as heat or punishment, but as potential. The thing you pass gently from one person to another, hoping it stays lit, hoping it never goes out. And in your mind you picture Prometheus walking still, not upward, no, it's punished, but downward, through forests and cities, through new myths and old minds. A spark in a long coat, a patient teacher with soot under his nails, still humming that song with no words, still listening, still watching you. Now let's pause here. The story, for now, has circled back to its beginning. Prometheus gave us fire. We gave him a story, and somewhere in between something warm and permanent happened. Because no matter how many times the eagle comes, no matter how many jars are opened, no matter what gods do with their thunder, the flame remains, in your hands, in your breath, in the silence after the last word. And now, as your breath softens and your mind begins to float, let all of this, flame, myth, memory, melt gently into the distance. You're lying somewhere safe now, maybe beside a long cold hearth, maybe beneath a tree where Prometheus once rested, maybe nowhere specific at all, just wrapped in warmth and thought. The story's done speaking. The fire has dimmed to glowing embers in your chest. No heat, no smoke, just comfort, just knowing. The world around you is still. The stars overhead blink slowly, like they're falling asleep with you. Far off, a breeze stirs the grass, whispering old myths in a language no one translates anymore. But you understand it, because it's in you now. Prometheus, the rebel with soot-streaked fingers and a stubborn heart, did more than give fire to mankind. He gave us the habit of reaching, of questioning, of creating beauty from bone and clay and trouble. And tonight, you walked beside him. You saw what he saw. You rested where he healed. And now, you carry a little piece of that fire with you. You don't need to do anything with it right now. Not yet, just rest. Let it glow, soft and sleepy, behind your ribs. Let the clay figures fade from view. Let the stars blur. You're safe. You're warm. And somewhere in the hush between breaths, a titan smiles.